Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Janot, VP of Marketing here at InsightsNow, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's conversation with Dave Lundahl, our CEO, and two very important guests today, Mickie French, Executive Director at the Center for Food Integrity, and Noel Anderson, Past President at the Institute of Food Technologists. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Mickie, would you like to share a quick introduction?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Mickie French. If you're not familiar with the Center for Food Integrity, we're a not-for-profit organization that serves the entire food industry, and in particular, our members. Our sole mission is to build trust in the food system by ensuring that the dialogue around issues facing the food industry today is fair, balanced, and science-based. So my career has spanned the food system from decastling corn back in Nebraska to working with some of the greatest CPG brands in marketing and strategic communications and a bit of everything in between. So I hope my integrated industry perspective can be of interest today. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Mickie. And Noel, would you like to share a little background as well?
Absolutely, Carrie. So I'm Noel Anderson. I'm a classically trained food scientist. I spent 18 years working at General Foods and Kraft. You name the brand, I probably worked on it in one way, shape, or another during those 18 years. I then worked at PepsiCo for 19 years. So again, whether it be Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Frito-Lay, Tropicana, I worked on all those brands as well. So hopefully I'll bring that science perspective as well as the industry perspective. But also I just rolled off as past president of IFT. So hopefully I can bring some perspectives from the IFT point of view to this conversation. So pleased to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Noel. And Dave, how about you? Would you like to give a little background?
Yeah, I've been in the industry a long while. I have worked in academia. I was a professor at Oregon State in food science for a while. Worked in the industry. Worked in and in different positions, mostly in research and consumer sensory research. And I worked, then on the supplier side in marketing research, founding InsightsNow in 2003. So done a number of things. So I'm really excited about this conversation today because, what InsightsNow is about is trying to, bring insights and utilize insights to set strategy, to develop business impact for the industry. And the food industry is one of the areas where we do a lot of work in, and especially in time of change. A lot that insights are needed for to kind of illuminate what is unknown so that companies can make smarter decisions.
Excellent. All right. Well, just really quickly before we dive in case anyone is new to joining us, we are using Zoom that I hope you're familiar with, but you are very welcome all along the way to enter your questions. So we may answer a few as the discussion transpires, but certainly at the end, we will dedicate some time to answer your questions. So please add those there. All right, well, today we're talking about consumer trust. If you're a professional working on bringing more sustainable food to market, you really know that simply positioning a product in a way that's more sustainable, it's not necessarily going to lead to success. So in fact, we found that many marketers are really hesitant to make sustainability claims for fear of being called out for greenwashing. And this hesitancy is what some people call green hushing. So today we're talking about consumer trust and how green hushing and other symptoms with their roots in trust are really impacting the food industry. We will be breaking it into three parts. So first, we're going to talk about thoughts on what's behind green hushing, how trust or lack of trust is keeping potential foods from achieving success in the marketplace, and then some things that can be done to improve trust. Okay, so let's start out with this question here. And I'll pose this to each of you. What do you think is the cause of green hushing?
Well, I'll be glad to go first. I was on a panel a few weeks ago And you learn so much just being on panels like this one. And in this panel is an international conference called Sustainability 2100. And we talked a lot about the root causes of greenhushing. And one of what we discussed is that marketers, really lack some confidence today in marketing products for their environmentally sustainable benefits. And one of the reasons that was highlighted, and I agree with this, is that there's a lot of concerns that people get called out for greenwashing, and our research that we've done at InsightsNow here is quite clearly that consumers just don't trust large brands. They don't trust large companies and even large government institutions, like, that are supposed to, keep us safe and so on, through regulations and all that. It's just simply easier to trust an individual or a group that's positioned to be a watchdog, calling out companies for things like greenwashing, even sometimes when there's not that much scientific information to back it up. So I think that's part of the issue, and I think it's worth highlighting, for at least my part, to contribute to this question.
Great. Oh, Noel, we've got you on mute.
I think that's great, Dave. And I totally agree with you. I do think there's considerable mistrust of brands and mistrust with companies. And there is that fear of attacks from these watchdog groups that might damage their brands. I mean, this is a real fear. However, the challenge with not saying anything is that leaves them onto their own to develop their own version of the truth. And today's day and age, this often means they're listening to social media to develop their points of view, which I think we all know isn't necessarily a good thing. So where I might differ, though, is I'm not sure that that is the root cause of greenhushing. Personally, I believe that one of the key issues we have is the lack of scientifically validated information that is generally and broadly accepted as truth. I would love to see all of us take more of an Einsteinian approach to some of these challenges that we all face. They're all very complex. And he's very famous for saying, if I only had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem, 5 minutes solving the problem. I don't think we spend enough time defining the problems and really getting to root cause. I think we spend, if we really do this well, we can ensure that we can do this in a way that brings others along with us. So let me give you a real life example that I encountered in the early 2000s. An NGO in India was very concerned about water quality and selling substandard products to the Indian consumers. She went out and collected samples of Coke and Pepsi from the marketplace and sent them to a university lab for testing for pesticide residues. They published the results, and sure enough, what they claimed in the press to the entire country was that basically Coke and Pepsi were poisoning the Indian consumers. They claimed that our products were loaded with pesticide residues. Needless to say, there was a huge public outcry. The government banned sales of our products in many of the states in India. And needless to say, our sales plummeted. PepsiCo leadership, Coke leadership wanted action, and I found myself the very next day, along with a number of others, on a plane to India to try to find out what's going on.
Oh my.
Yeah, it was just an unbelievable. The very next day, visa and all, on a plane to India.
Yep.
So what we made sure we did, because we didn't know whether it was true or not, what the cause was, if it was true, et cetera, was we spent considerable time trying to analyze the problem from all different perspectives. After much work, we found out that we really didn't have the capability to analyze for pesticide residues in these type of products at the levels that these people would be interested in. Those methodologies didn't exist. The first step needed was to develop a method that could figure out what is reality. Is there anything in there? If so, at what level? This process took 18 months working with AOAC International to develop robust methods that everyone would embrace as being validated, accurate, reliable methods to measure these type of things. We work with the Indian government, very famous scientists in India, to gain their support of the approach. And we actually adapted these methods and procedures in India, and they became the basis for setting their regulations. At the end of the day, the root cause of this problem wasn't pesticide residues in beverages. It's the fact that they couldn't be measured accurately. When this NGO sent it to these labs in the university, they just did a standard GC retention time analysis, had huge peaks, and assumed it was all pesticide residues. What in fact they were measuring were a lot of the flavor compounds, and when done right, we found out that they really didn't have a problem to begin with. So again, analyzing the problem from many different perspectives, leaving no stone unturned to look at what might be the cause of this issue was key to resolving this issue. And I'll actually touch on that a little bit later in our conversation.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that, Noel, I think the tendency to say nothing or to green hush really comes from the fact that some organizations were quick to make commitments to sustainability goals without that full understanding, right? Without going through that due diligence to really understand what the barriers are to reaching those goals. They have blind spots in the exact areas where they're setting goals. And so not knowing where that information has come from or should come from, you know, for example, farmers are deluged every day with a request for CO2 credits. And once those are spoken for, they're gone. Right? They're not reusable. And there's not enough carbon credits, regardless of the source, to meet all of the global CO2 net zero goals through credits alone. So many were quick to announce a goal before having a strategy to get there and understand where they were going to actually be able to implement the strategies. So organizations realize that they're setting unachievable goals, so they're saying nothing, green hushing.
So that reminds me of another one of my key learnings in industry, and that's the critical importance of having a clear vision, mission, and in this particular instance, really good strategies which indicate what you're going to do, but also what you're not going to do to achieve that vision and mission. Along the way, we need to have the right metrics. You need to be able to measure these things. If you can't measure it, you can't control it, you can't improve it. A lot of the times, to your point, Mickie, we make these strategies, but we don't know how we're going to measure success. If we can't measure where we're at, we're not going to know how to course correct to be able to make sure we make progress against that vision, mission, and strategy. So again, I think this is a lot of really, really hard work, but it needs to be done and done well. And the final point I will make is if you do measure it, then you can start to understand where you are and you might have to course correct. So my experience is strat plans are always pretty much set in stone. My perspective is they need to be flexible based on what you learn along the way so you can adjust and be successful.
You know, I think these points and these stories that both of you brought up are so important. And I just couldn't agree more. You know, this whole area of developing a strategy before teams actually start the planning and measuring is I think really important. I mean, we hired a strategist this last year. His name is Brian Brisky. And what I've learned from him is that strategy is different from planning. It involves like a rigor, that helps teams visualize the complexities, and today is a lot of complexities, consumer market, competitive forces, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of ambiguity today, especially in these times of volatility, So, and I think strategic work, that rigor, before to know how you're going to accomplish a mission and vision is so important. So I couldn't agree more. It's a really great points.
Awesome. Thank you all. Great discussion. And it leads us well to our second question. So how does a lack of trust hinder product success in the market?
Yeah, I think this is where things really start to get interesting. Take, for example, sustainability claims. such as, environmental, sustainable, eco-friendly, free trade, fair trade, or other sort of things that relate to aspects of environmental or social, responsibility. Our consumer research has found that buying more sustainable food alternatives is the top unfulfilled aspiration by 47%, about half of U.S. primary household shoppers. And that's big. Demand is there. But what this means is that there's also a lot of barriers that exist that are preventing shoppers from buying more sustainable, because sustainability is not being what people are actually doing today, and so this whole idea of greenwashing is really the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. It's a symptom for what I think are 4 key barriers. This is what our research found, to sustainability. Lack of trust, certainly, as we talked about here a minute ago, is certainly paramount. Lack of trusted information. People just don't have information to make decisions. There's a lot of concerns and expectations about product performance and experiences, for that matter. And there's a lot of price barriers. And you see this with plant-based products. I just read an article in Food Tech yesterday on that. So everything goes back to trust. I think without trust, brands can't communicate. As we were talking about, this greenwashing, they can't communicate really well. Without trusted information about claims, consumers, don't have the right expectations. They don't know who to trust, and when products don't perform as promised, well, trust is further eroded, So I think it's a vicious cycle. And these 4 things, of course, when brands can't scale their businesses, and maybe they're hitting the price points wrong, that's a huge barrier as well. So I think in the end, our research has also shown that 43% of shoppers, primary shoppers in the U.S., only 43% trust the U.S. food system. So most are on the other side. They don't. And so when you unpack this insight, it's interesting to note that trust goes way up when shoppers are able to change their buying behaviors in ways that improves their trust. So like buying online, going to natural food stores, buying categories such plant-based meats as an example, that trust goes over 55% amongst those groups. And really interesting, trust is the lowest amongst those that are relying on clean label, relying on, claims on pack, front and back pack, to make the decisions. And last, the lowest group is around 30% in terms of their trust, is ones that can't afford to upscale. They're just forced to buy whatever is on sale. So I think this coping mechanism is really important determinant of who people trust and how much trust do they have in the U.S. food system. So anyways, that's really interesting content.
I have to agree, Dave. I think that information is just fantastic and so interesting. Another learning I got from working, again, with consumers in the food industry for more than 40 years is that oftentimes people say one thing, but then do something else. Or another way to say this, what came from a good friend of mine at PepsiCo, which hopefully many of you remember after I say this, is does the audio match the video? Are we as a company, what we're saying, are we doing what we say? So I love that saying because I really think that it holds us all to a high standard to make sure those 2 things match. So net, while consumers may say they want more sustainable products, if they don't taste great, and from everything I've seen throughout my career, taste is still king. And if you don't meet and exceed all the expectations of that product concept at the right cost, with the right margins, you're not going to get repeat purchase and you're not going to get a sustainable business. So you have to make all 4 of those things work for you to be successful and make a difference in the marketplace. So interestingly, an item you brought up around the claims such as environmentally sustainable, eco-friendly. I think there's an area that needs much, much, much more work and vetting before they should be used. So what do those terms really mean? So just think about it for a minute. What do they mean? If you don't know what they mean, how are you going to measure that? Can they reliably be measured? And then secondly, even if they can be measured, is that difference, that it might be a statistical difference, significantly different number or whatever, is that a significant difference to the consumer or to the environment? So things might be different, but they might not make a difference in the scheme of things. Obviously, that type of thought process and that type of work is going to take a lot of time and effort. But again, to me, it's absolutely necessary that we deliver a measurable difference in the scheme of things, that we should have to be held to that standard before we're allowed to make that claim. At the end of the day, I think the huge challenge to the food industry is to deliver great tasting products that can be shown to truly deliver against meaningful claims, clearly defined, at the right cost. If we do this consistently over time and make a real difference in people's lives, I think trust will come. But you really have to consistently deliver that over time.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've seen the same thing. Taste is absolutely king, and the whole consumers will tell you what they think you want to hear. But on top of that, anytime that we are providing claims that are too difficult for them to understand, too vague, right? This whole idea of sustainability, what does this mean to me? And difficult to substantiate, really are doing more than not building trust, they're eroding trust. So I think these product claims need to have a meaningful difference. What does this mean to me in my life? As you've said, like just simply making a minimal shift of 10% less sodium or sugar or whatever, when not really aligned with consumer expectations, won't move the needle. I'm not surprised. I picked up a bit on that clean label eater number of 36%. I'm not surprised that they're more skeptical on a whole. But I would imagine if they're looking at their preferred brands, their levels of trust are much higher. And I think this comes from the fact that these brands have already built trust with their consumer base through shared values. So CFI's trust model proves that shared values are 3 to 5 times more important to building trust than simply just throwing facts and figures at consumers. And science without making that connection first through shared values. So if I don't know that I trust you or I share values with you, I'm not sure that the data and the facts that you're providing are going to land, right? So data and facts are critical, but they should be used like salt, sprinkled judiciously to reinforce those shared values.
Yeah,
So it's an interesting combination of really leading with that shared values, really making that affinity with your consumers, and then backing up the claims that you're making with the facts, the figures, and the science.
Yeah, I really like what both of you said about taste is king, and it's the thing that is interesting today is what does taste mean? What does that mean from a product developer if you design products? Because consumer tastes are constantly changing, and sensory, a lot of the industry was about making things taste, people like it more, liking. But when it comes to sustainability, that's a whole new ballgame. And so what we're discovering in our research in the design of foods is, and packaging for that matter, is what sort of sensorial qualities signal that something is better for the environment, something is, whatever, eco-friendly or more sustainable. And here's an example. We did some work on a plant-based alternative to sliced meat. It was a plant-based sliced turkey product. And we're working on the packaging, the package design. They had different variants we were looking at in the context of different situations. One was in next to other meat products in refrigerated pack, and the other was in next to other sort of products that was in the alternative things for people that were vegetarian. So, and what we found is that shoppers, especially when it was in the vegetarian area, were really turned off by packaging that had a lot of plastic, even though I'm sure it had a much longer shelf life. And that makes sense. It's the whole product has to, if you're going to position something as more sustainable, and so on, it's got to be complete product, and the brand for that matter, that all have to perform together, have to work together to have this right cues that signal what this product is about. And in the end, it was a recyclable cardboard container with minimum packaging that won the day.
Awesome. Thank you all. So this brings us to our final question. So what do you think can be done about improving trust and minimizing issues such as greenwashing? So Mickie, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with transparency, right? And that's what consumers are demanding. Organizations should understand that transparency isn't, we're not asking for the recipe to the secret sauce, but really anticipating what stakeholders need and want, proactively providing them that information, and then being willing to engage, importantly, on that two-way dialogue about it. I think companies, a couple decades ago started to understand that they can't always own the conversation when social media came through, but brands, today now can provide a number of opportunities to align with consumers on those shared values in a two-way dialogue. So one of the things that we did recently is knowing that Gen Z and these younger consumers are learning through experience, right? And are wanting to experience brands and have an experiential interaction and relationship with brands is we brought together Gen Z and millennial farmers and foodie YouTubers who are reporting in the YouTube space about everything from animal welfare to food safety, food science, etc. So we brought the Gen Z YouTubers to a farm, to a ranch, so that they could understand from throughout the entire value chain of how a steak got to their plate. And we brought the Gen Z farmers into the city, and they experienced what happens in a restaurant, what happens in a supermarket, what happens in the transportation once it leaves their farm throughout the whole thing. And I think that little road trip showed us that there was shared value between these Gen Z farmers and Gen Z consumers. And therefore, once they were aligned, we could truly be transparent and give a hands-on learning experience to both groups. It's kind of like Mark quote, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, right? I think that little road trip really helped open the minds of, really being on the farm and understanding, having these YouTubers say, hey, they have a doctor and a nutritionist and an exercise, coach, just like I do, right? So I think transparency and collaboration will help the industry make a real difference on these environmental sustainability issues. So the question I have here is, how do we make saving the planet a pre-competitive issue, right? Food safety. Today, if a company is having an issue, they'll call up a competitor and have that conversation about, hey, because food safety is for the common good of everyone, how can we make environmental sustainability the same, right? As we've discussed with some of our partners at the World Wildlife Fund, we don't have time to develop thousands of learning curves across the food industry to solve all these world's problems, right? So we're convening members at CFI across the entire food system for conversations and working groups to help develop common solutions and try to shortcut that learning curve. So I think that transparency and that collaboration in a pre-competitive way is really two of the areas that organizations can help increase that consumer trust.
I love what you had to say, Mickie, and I'll just add one other thing that you are doing, but you didn't mention it, and that's engagement. Because when you engage people in solving the problem, they become part owner of the solution of the problem. And that's the way they really, truly understand what's going on. So kudos to what you're doing with your organization. And I do think, as we think about these challenges that are facing, we need to find a way to do this work together. And when I say together, it's not just industry. To me, it's academia, it is industry, it's government, it's consumers, it's the consumer advocates, it's the watchdogs, the detractors. By involving all these interested parties in the challenge, we help them, make them become part of the solution. So I'm going to go back to that India pesticide example just for a second here, because I was very proud of what we were able to do. First and foremost, PepsiCo and Coca-Cola are fierce, fierce, fierce competitors. We partnered on this very closely. I knew people and worked with people at Coke on a daily basis. We work with the Indian government officials. We work with a whole group of very famous Indian scientists. Work with AOAC International to develop those third-party validated methods to measure the pesticide residues. We had a meeting at the end of this process where we engaged the head of the NGO that originally attacked us. We went through what we did, why we did it, what the results were. We ended up taking products out of the marketplace into the labs and published those results for all Indian consumers to look at and react to. At the end of the day, by collaborating across the entire system, we got buy-in, acceptance, and most importantly, they believed the results that our products didn't have these residues in them. They were safe, and sales were soon restored back to where they used to be. So very, very proud of those efforts. But it involved the entire village to accomplish that.
Yeah. Wow, I love that story, Noel. And Mickie, I really like your statement, how do you make saving the planet a pre-competitive issue? I mean, that says a lot. And again, my hat's off to you and your group, what you're trying to do in bringing these different parties together to foster transparency and discover shared values. I think this is really important. Imagine the power of getting all key players together, industry players across the chain, supply chain, influencers and detractors, as you've suggested, and to discover that. It really struck me. I also imagine if we could bottle up those learnings in terms of understanding the complexities and how to work together and provide that to CEOs and corporate leadership, to set pre-competitive sustainability strategies, to work together. Imagine the power if we could do that, because I think that goes a long way in terms of, this idea of setting strategy first, because this part of the complexity is what we're dealing with here. And this is new, and we live in these volatile, times of ambiguity and so on, uncertainties. So if we're going to be able to achieve these goals, these very important goals of dealing with the challenges of reducing greenhouse gases and so on, and feeding the world at the same time, we're going to need to all row in the same direction.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. And I'll invite you, Mickie, as well, if you have any final thoughts here to share as we close in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we started with the concept of green hushing, right? Like hiding and hushing and just not saying anything. What if we were, I like to be the what if glass half full person. What if we were to focus on sharing transparently in a pre-competitive way across the food system, what each of us are doing to be better stewards of the planet, and invite others to join us, right? I mean, that would make the path to a healthy planet ready to feed 8 going on 9 billion people a much shorter journey. So I think this has been an amazing conversation of all the different ways to look at it, from strategy all the way through to execution, and then the how we do it is the transparency and ultimately building trust. So
Thank you, Mickie. Same to you, Noel. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just a few things. I think our journey forward is going to involve dealing with very, very complex challenges. What we talked about over the last 3 years at IFT Board of Directors, we live in VUCA times, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's not going to be easy to solve those challenges. I think to be successful, we need to be more thoroughly assess the issues we face or the opportunities, set clear visions and strategies to achieve them. We need to figure out how we can measure them so we know whether we're making progress or not, and we can course correct if needed. And I think we can only achieve success, and I think you said this, Mickie, by engaging and consistently delivering against expectations and hopefully exceeding expectations. When the audio matches the video, then we create the trust needed to move forward and be successful.
Couldn't agree more. That's really great. And this gives everyone confidence. If you could set those strategies and those path forwards, gives everyone confidence to do their part. Gives marketers confidence to, not be afraid to make claims and to put information out that is transparent and accurate, but yet, addresses, information that consumers need, So I think it's great points. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all. And now the audience has had a chance to hear your insightful perspectives. And with this quote in mind that I think really aligns well to some of what Noel was sharing about engagement, we do invite you to share if this discussion will impact what you are going to do going forward. So please share with us here. We'll give the audience some time to answer our quick question. Right. Give another second, hopefully a few more of you. All right.
It's pretty evenly split.
Yeah, pretty evenly split. I think hopefully we'll have some long answers. Hopefully you guys will share what you'll do. We'd love to hear that. All right. Well, you guys able to see those results? I'll push us forward. All right. Well, hopefully it does give you guys, a lot to think about, and that it does impact, your moves going forward. Again, we covered a lot of really important topics that I think it gives people some fuel for the future. All right.
Couple of questions in the Q&A.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yes.
So
maybe I can take, Carrie, maybe I can take a shot at addressing Bruce's question.
I would love that. So I'll pause here on this slide and let's dive into our Q&A.
Yeah.
Thanks, Noel.
So I assume everyone can read it. Do I need to restate the question before
I think you should reread it.
Yeah. So Bruce asked the question, as part of the problem is that there's no accepted methods for measuring and reporting sustainability. And I'm going to go back to the India pesticide issue for a minute. To me, it's the first step is to accurately define the problem. When you really get to the essence of the problem, then you can figure out whether you have the right methods in place to address that particular issue. Someone went out and analyzed all those beverages and said, hey, we had parts per thousand of pesticides in the beverages. If we went with that as truth based on the existing methods, we'd have been trying to solve the wrong problem. So defining the problem is the first step. Once you've done that, then you can figure out whether you have the right methods to be able to analyze where you're at and any progress that you're making along the way. So hopefully that helps. I think you need to do the first things first, which is defining the problem. And I don't think we have that for sustainability yet.
Agree.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mickie.
No, I was going to move on to the next question, but if you have something to add there.
Yeah, the only thing I add is that, there's knowns and unknowns with the complexities of everything we're trying to do. And just the thing about, accepted methods for measuring and reporting sustainability, is that from the consumer's perspective? Is that an industry standard? So the question, you have to look at both sides. Is as Noel said earlier, what is the meaning of that in a consumer's mind when you make a claim? And then and I know this is a lot of work is being going on at the federal government and looking at advertising claims and so on, trying to set some sort of definitions and so on like that. So there's good guardrails for companies to use. And I think there's also a lot of unknowns in the complexities. And this is where I think consumer research and market research, to understand those insights are important. And I think part of the idea of a strategy with regard to any sort of initiative or maybe a corporate broad initiative is to understand the complexity and know what you know and know what you don't know so that you don't get blindsided from what you don't know, or what you don't know, you don't even know. And so I think that's my add to this is that, and the importance highlighting of developing strategy first when it's these complex issues is so important. And so that's my add.
Yeah,
And maybe I just add one other thing on top of that, Dave, and I think I said this earlier, is even if you can measure it, are you making a real difference? If we're not making a real difference, then we're not helping the consumers, and they'll figure that out at some point in time, and we'll lose trust yet again. So it's got to be a meaningful difference.
And then I was just going to jump in on the easiest ways to build trust with consumers is the other question in the Q&A. It's really, again, going back to that shared values, right? Find where your values intersect with the consumer values. And from there, then sprinkle in that, like I said, the data and the science like salt when it comes to consumer communications to back up what those shared values are. And a lot of the work that we do as well in various different research areas is really what are consumers thinking and feeling? What are their thoughts and fears? And if you start there, as opposed to how am I trying to sell some more product to them, which ultimately we're in the business of being in business for most food companies, but it's really figuring out where those shared values are that you can really truly deliver on and be transparent about delivering on, right? So I think farm tours, if you're a rancher, if you're in the meat business, factory tours, if you're, really that full transparency, that experiential transparency with consumers, especially these younger consumers, because they're going to overtake us old guys really quickly. And they learn by doing, they learn by experiencing brands. So really giving them all of the information that that they're going to come looking for really before they ask for it is is one of the many ways to build trust.
I assume there's probably a lot of scientists on this call, but I'll just echo what Mickie said, I think, and build on one point around communication and that, yeah. We really need to find ways to better communicate effectively with our stakeholders, all of our stakeholders. And Dave and I were at a meeting a number of years ago where Alan Alda gave a little presentation to us, and we used some of his training. And what he basically told us is we need to lead with emotion. And then to your point, Mickie, judiciously use some scientific background to make sure we make the point. But you really need to lead with emotion and really sell it to get them to embrace what we're trying to do. And the second thing you reminded me of is the old adult learning principles. Tell me, I'll forget. Show me, I'll remember, but engage me and I will understand. And I think throughout this entire journey on these complex issues, we need to figure out how to better engage a very diverse group of stakeholders to help define, analyze, and solve the challenges that we face going forward.
Yeah, I think I'll add to this question, easiest ways to build trust with consumers is consumers have relationships with brands through product experiences. Really important to understand. Consumers have relationships with brands through product experiences. If you have a brand strategy, a way in which you want to evolve your brand forward, you need to also have a product strategy, ways in which those products that are under that brand can exude and stand for what the brand is. Now, if a lot of brands are never going to be a really good representative for a product that is positioned as more sustainable. There's certain products just not there. It's very difficult. I never say never, but it's very difficult just because of how they've been positioned in the minds of consumers and what that relationship is. And so it starts with the brand and having a great brand strategy, and then understanding what is the product strategy. What are the sensorial qualities, the cues that signal the same sort of rewards that people get from their experiences in using products that are the same sort of rewards that go back to being part of what the brand stands for. And I see a lot of companies not understanding how to sync and bring the brand and the product together because they haven't established the right strategy yet. And so I think that's I can make tons of examples of this. It'll take up a lot of time, but I think that's really important. I think that's led to another question that's come our way.
Yeah, that's right. I'll read that. You guys chime in here with your thoughts. But as brands build stronger trust with consumers, is there any approach that we should stay away from or anything we should be aware of?
I mean, I think it's sort of the topic of what this webinar is about is green hushing, right? Don't be quiet. Don't just remain silent, because as with our children, they'll fill that void of silence with their own ideas, right? So I think that's one of the first things. Just continue to keep a steady flow of information and of two-way information. So also don't speak at consumers. They're done with that way of working. So involve them in the conversation, involve them in the solutions as well. And I think that really will go far. So
I guess the only build I'd have on that, Mickie, gets back to something Dave said. I think the strategy to build trust with customers is to be true to your brand identity. And once you start to stray from that, that's when you start to get in trouble. So every brand will have their own strategy based on the concept and all that type of thing. But if you start to talk about sustainability when you're talking about a premium quality ice cream, it's probably not the right thing to be talking about, and you won't develop trust with your consumer base.
Very good.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with that more. But the also is the difference between a company and what a company stands for. What a CEO is trying to move a company forward, you know. And I know there's you know, a lot of boardrooms, or you know, this is probably a conversation topic, you know. And what are we standing for as a company, and in terms of still achieve, you know, providing a return for their shareholders, you know, and those stakeholders. I think that's important, but so how do brands for a company, the portfolio company, move forward in a way that supports what the company is trying to do? And I think that's there needs to be an alignment there as well, just like there needs to be more alignment between brands and products.
Right. Well, I think that's all the questions. As we wrap here, I'll just remind everyone that we do these on a monthly basis. So our next really exciting session is March 23rd. We'll be focusing on what's naturally trending in 2023, where we will share with you our findings from the Natural Products Expo West coming up in early March.
Hey, I want to say thank you to Mickie French and Noel Anderson. It was tremendous to have you join us, and I really enjoyed my time back and forth with you as a panelist.
It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
It was great fun and very nice to spend time with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you for those joining us. We appreciate it.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.